The house was always quiet. Too quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't soothe you, but reminded you how hollow things had become. Clara leaned against the marble counter, wine glass in hand, watching the ice slowly melt in the bucket Nathan had left out after his weekly business call. He hadn't said more than 10 words to her all evening. Same as the night before. Same as most nights. Nathan had always been a man of routine. Work first, obligations second, and affection, if ever, came in brief, cold offerings like scheduled dinner reservations or an obligatory kiss on the cheek. They'd been married for 8 years now, and in that time, Clara had gone from feeling adored to feeling invisible. She didn't even remember when the transition happened. Maybe it was subtle. Or maybe she'd just been too numb to notice. The only disruption in that stillness had come recently, Nathan's stepson, Eli, moving in after dropping out of college. He just needs some time to figure things out, Nathan had said. Clara had nodded politely. She barely knew the boy, man, really, but agreed to let him stay in the guest room down the hall. It had been a month now. Eli was quiet, polite, always in his own world. She rarely saw him during the day. At night, she would hear faint footsteps, the occasional closing of his door, music playing softly through the walls. He never caused trouble. If anything, he blended into the silence like everything else in that house. But lately, Clara had started noticing him. Noticing in a way that surprised her. It started the night she couldn't sleep. The sheets beside her were cold. Nathan hadn't come to bed again. Clara got up, padded down the hallway barefoot, her silk robe flowing behind her like a whisper. She went into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of red wine, and leaned against the doorway to the living room. That's when she saw him. Eli was lying on the couch, shirtless, a blanket loosely draped over his lower body. The glow from his laptop lit his face. He didn't see her. He was wearing headphones, eyes locked on the screen, completely absorbed. She didn't mean to stare. But something about the moment made her breath catch, like she'd walked into something too private, too intimate. She turned away before he saw her, heart beating faster than it had in weeks. The next morning, she told herself it was nothing. A simple accident. She hadn't seen anything, not really. But something shifted inside her after that. She started noticing the way Eli moved, how effortlessly he glided through the house. How his voice, though quiet, carried a soft, gravelly warmth when he said things like good morning or thanks for dinner. He had this stillness about him. A weight. Like someone who had seen more than he let on. He barely looked her in the eyes, but when he did, there was something there, something unreadable. Clara found herself lingering in rooms longer when he entered. She started making more elaborate breakfasts, leaving out dishes she knew he liked. She wasn't even sure why. It wasn't intentional at first. That's what she told herself. And then came the second night. She had been reading in the sitting room, curled under a blanket, when she heard a sound. It was faint, barely noticeable. A soft groan, almost like a breath catching in someone's throat. She froze. At first, she thought maybe Nathan had come home early. But the bedroom was still dark. The sound came again. This time, more drawn out. Curiosity got the best of her. She set the book down and tiptoed down the hall. Her pulse quickened. As she approached the guest room, the door was slightly ajar. Just a crack. Enough to see a sliver of the room. She knew she shouldn't have looked. But she did. Inside, Eli was on the bed. Shirtless again. His back arched slightly, his eyes closed, mouth parted. One hand gripping the sheet. The other beneath the waistband of his sweatpants. Clara gasped softly, instinctively stepping back. Her foot made the faintest creak on the wooden floor. She turned and hurried back to her room, hand pressed to her chest, breath shallow. In the dark, she lay staring at the ceiling for hours. She couldn't stop picturing it. The way his body moved, the way his face twisted in pleasure. The heat in her chest, in her stomach. The guilt. And something else. She was ashamed to admit how alive she felt. The next morning, she avoided looking at him. But he looked the same as always. Calm. Distant. Maybe he hadn't heard her. Maybe he didn't know she had watched. She couldn't tell. At dinner, Nathan talked about quarterly reports and an upcoming client trip. Eli sat across from her, quietly eating. Clara tried not to glance up too often, but she caught him once, his eyes lingering on her lips before flicking back to his plate. Her stomach twisted. What was happening to her? Later that night, as she stood by the window staring out at the moonlit backyard, she felt the emptiness again, the one that had haunted her for years.
Only now, it was louder, more unbearable.
Nathan was in the office, on yet another late call. She heard Eli walking past the hallway, his bare feet brushing against the floorboards.
She didn't turn around.
But her body did.
That ache in her chest returned. The desire. The danger. She didn't know what she was doing. But part of her didn't want to stop. Not anymore.
Clara wasn't sleeping much anymore. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind would betray her with images of Eli, his body arching in soft gasps, his mouth open, his hand working beneath the waistband of those sweatpants.
The memory had burned itself into her.
It came back during the day while folding laundry, while pouring coffee, even during conversations with Nathan that she couldn't follow. She felt like she was floating through her own life, her body present but her mind somewhere else, somewhere it shouldn't be.
Eli acted as if nothing had happened.
If he knew she had watched, he didn't show it. He still passed her in the hallway with a quiet morning, still helped clear the table after dinner, still disappeared into his room for hours on end.
That silence was maddening.
It gave her too much space to project, to fantasize, to spiral. One afternoon, Clara was reading in the sunroom when she heard footsteps approach. Eli stood in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her. There was something about the way he leaned against the frame, casual, but aware. "I didn't mean to scare you the other night," he said softly.
Clara's heart stopped.
The words felt like a drop of cold water down her spine. She started, but her voice caught. "I didn't mean to.
I wasn't trying to see anything.
I just—"
Eli didn't interrupt. He let her stammer.
"I heard a noise."
"I didn't know what it was," she said.
"I shouldn't have.
I'm sorry."
He walked into the room, set the mug down, and sat across from her. The sun lit his face in soft amber hues.
His eyes weren't accusing. Just curious.
"It's okay," he said.
"You looked scared."
"I was embarrassed," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
There was a silence.
Not uncomfortable, but heavy. "I'm not used to people seeing me like that," he added. "Me neither," she said, surprising herself with the honesty. She wasn't sure what she meant, whether she was talking about seeing or being seen. Maybe both. The next few days were a blur. Clara felt as if a current had begun to move between them, quiet but constant. Every time they were in the same room, it was there, unspoken, simmering. She found herself watching the clock when Eli went out, listening for the creak of the floorboards when he came home. Every sound felt amplified, every glance too loaded to hold. Then came the evening when everything broke open. Nathan had gone to a late meeting. Eli was in the kitchen, rinsing a plate. Clara walked in to grab a glass of water, but they ended up facing each other near the sink. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You keep avoiding me," he said. "I don't think that's true," she replied, though it was. "Then why does it feel like it?" She looked down, pretending to dry her hands on the towel even though they weren't wet. "Because I don't know what I'm doing." Eli leaned closer. "You don't have to do anything." Clara looked up into his eyes, brown, steady, calm in a way that made her feel exposed. "But you're not just a boy, Eli," she said quietly. "You're my husband's stepson. You live in this house. This is insane." "I didn't ask for this," he replied, "but you're not the only one feeling it." The honesty in his voice pierced her. She stepped back, but her spine hit the fridge behind her. She was trapped, in more ways than one. Her pulse raced. "I shouldn't want this," she said. "Then don't." He turned to walk away, but she grabbed his wrist. They stared at each other for what felt like a full minute. Then she kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't graceful. It was impulsive, messy, laced with guilt and longing. Eli didn't pull away. His hands found her waist, then her back, then her face. Their bodies pressed against each other as weeks, months, of quiet desire exploded all at once. They made their way down the hallway, bumping into the wall, his mouth never leaving hers. When they reached the guest room, Clara hesitated. But Eli pulled her gently inside, closed the door behind them, and kissed her again, slower this time, with more meaning. They undressed like they were afraid to stop. Like stopping would bring them back to reality. The way he touched her, careful, patient, was unlike anything she had felt in years. He didn't rush. He didn't fumble. He studied her like he wanted to memorize her skin, her breath, the way her body reacted to his. Clara moaned into his mouth, clutching his hair,
his shoulders. She felt alive again. Fully, painfully alive. The part of her that had been sleeping for years finally stirred, hungry and aching. Afterwards, they lay in silence, tangled in the sheets. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting quiet shadows across the room. Eli traced circles on her back with his fingers, but Clara stared at the ceiling, eyes wide. She felt everything at once: satisfaction, shame, fear, confusion, desire. "I shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "You already did," he said. She turned her face away. Eli didn't push. He rolled onto his side and closed his eyes. Clara quietly got up, pulled on her robe, and slipped out of the room. She paused in the hallway, listening for Nathan. The house was still. She tiptoed back into her bedroom, heart pounding. She slid under the covers, stared up into the dark, and let the silence settle over her like a confession. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Clara didn't sleep that night. The warmth of Eli's body still clung to her skin, ghosting across her chest, her thighs, her lips. She lay on her side facing away from Nathan, eyes open in the dark, the weight of guilt pressing into her chest like a brick. Nathan stirred once in his sleep, rolled over, and draped his arm around her waist without even waking. His touch didn't bring her comfort. It brought nausea. In the morning, the world looked unchanged. The sun still poured through the sheer curtains, birds still chirped in the garden, and the smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. But inside her, something had fractured. She went through the motions, brushing her hair, applying her lipstick, dressing carefully in a long robe that covered everything. But none of it felt real. She saw Eli at the kitchen table, eating cereal. He looked up briefly, his expression unreadable, then looked back down at his bowl. Clara's heart skipped. He looked distant, detached. Was he ashamed? Regretful? Or was this simply his way of surviving the aftermath? She poured herself coffee without speaking. Their silence now had a different flavor. It wasn't just tension. It was a shared secret wrapped in shame and memory. Nathan walked in minutes later, kissed Clara on the temple, and poured himself a cup. "Sleep okay?" he asked casually. She nodded, unable to look at him. "Fine." That single lie felt like poison. The next few days stretched on like a slow, quiet punishment. Clara couldn't stop replaying that night in her head, the way it started, the way it ended, the way her body betrayed her so completely. She tried to keep her distance from Eli, but avoiding him was impossible in a house with thin walls and overlapping routines. One afternoon, she found a note tucked under her favorite mug on the top shelf. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things worse. But for one night, it felt like I existed. E." She read it twice, tears threatening her eyes. She couldn't respond. She didn't know how. At night, Nathan asked her if she was feeling okay. "You seem distant," he said gently, concern flickering in his eyes. "I'm just tired," she said again. But tired didn't even begin to describe it. She was hollow, raw, torn in places that wouldn't show on the surface. Her body remembered everything, but her mind refused to make peace with any of it. She began sleeping in the guest room to get better rest. Nathan didn't question it. He had grown used to her being absent, even while present. That's what made all this possible in the first place. Eli didn't say a word about that night again. He carried himself as if nothing had happened, though Clara occasionally caught him watching her from across the room. Not with lust. With something closer to sadness. Regret, maybe. Or confusion. Then, one Friday morning, Eli sat down at the breakfast table and spoke. "I'm moving out." Clara froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Nathan looked up from his tablet. "Where to?" "I got a job offer in Portland. Found a place already. It's time." Clara kept her eyes fixed on her cereal, heart thudding. She didn't say anything. Couldn't. Nathan clapped him on the back. "That's great, son. Proud of you." Son. The word scraped something deep inside her. Eli wasn't his son by blood, but the title was close enough to twist the knife further. Later that evening, Clara found Eli outside on the back porch, smoking quietly under the dim glow of the garden lights. She stepped out, arms folded over her chest, the chill biting at her skin. "You're really going?" she asked. He nodded without looking at her. "Yeah." She sat beside him on the bench, silence stretching between them like a wound. "I wasn't expecting it to feel like this," she whispered. "Neither was I." They both stared out at the night,
the stillness between them louder than words. "You weren't just a distraction," he said suddenly. "Not to me." Clara looked at him then. Really looked. His youth, his pain, his searching gaze. The part of her that longed for connection had found it in him, and now it was slipping away. "I don't regret that night," she said quietly. "I do. But not for the reasons you think." She waited, unsure of what to say. "I regret that we're not in a different world," he finished. The next morning, Clara stood by the front window as Eli loaded the last box into the back of an old Honda. Nathan helped him carry the final few things. They hugged. A long, masculine embrace. Then Eli turned and looked at the house one last time. Their eyes met through the glass. He gave her the faintest smile. Not a goodbye. A thank you. Or maybe an apology. Maybe both. Then he got in and drove off. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It was heavier. Real. Clara stood there for a long time, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't cry. Not yet. But the tears sat behind her ribs like rain clouds. That night, Nathan made reservations at her favorite restaurant. "It's been a while since we had a proper date night," he said. Clara nodded. "Sure." She sat across from him at dinner, smiling, sipping wine, listening to him talk about office renovations and digital marketing trends. She nodded at the right times. Laughed politely. The food tasted like ash in her mouth. When they got home, Nathan kissed her shoulder as she walked into the bedroom. "I missed you," he said softly. Clara smiled but didn't answer. She went to the bathroom, closed the door, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face looked the same. But she wasn't. She turned off the lights and sat on the edge of the tub, the darkness swallowing her whole. In the silence Eli left behind, she rediscovered something painful and essential. She was still capable of wanting. Still capable of feeling. And now, she had to carry the weight of that knowledge in a house where no one truly saw her. Not even herself. Not anymore.